Hollywood does not know how to make Dune. Hollywood does not, they can't make Lord of the Rings. Hollywood can't make a Chris Nolan film.
It's so interesting to me how Hollywood it feels because of how many big names. I was just like, man, this is really going to be the Hollywood Dune movie.
Yeah.
Right? And then I watch it and I was like, wow, that was really good. And then the next movie, there's like Austin Butler, Lawrence Pugh. Like,
we're doing it again.
Here we go again.
Welcome back to the Wacky Wonderful Wiseworks podcast, all you guys, gals, geeks, and goofballs. Oddly enough, guys, Geeks and Goofballs is the name of our Patreon and YouTube membership tiers. I will say, if you join us on YouTube memberships, it's only $3.99 a month, and you can get cool stickers when we go live. You can get free episodes early. Don't mean to plug right at the top. I just thought Geeks and Goofballs, let's do it.
Good segue. Very solid, very sneaky.
Sneaky is my middle name.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of sneaky, Joshua is not on the episode today because he's got a little bit of a throat thing. He's basically talking like this.
Oh man.
So
yeah.
It's not going to be good for podcasting.
He barely knew how to talk before, so I mean. But no, you guys, you should hear him. He really does. I'm still a little bit sick, but he sounds like, I mean, I want to say Friday. No, it was Thursday when I talked to him. He was like, man, I just don't feel good. He got home Friday and he's like,
it's like a little golem creature.
I think I'm really sick. I don't think I'm going to be able to record the podcast on Saturday. Master, please.
He called me before we started recording. He's like,
can you do me a favor and get me a podcast?
I know.
I'm trying to edit clips.
For someone who is like having so much trouble with his voice, he wants to talk all the time.
Didn't he? Yeah.
I told him this morning, I'm like, maybe you should just not talk.
Just
maybe
rest,
that would help. And he goes,
I don't know that.
I'm like, partially because I think it would be good for your voice, partially because it would be good for my ears. It really is.
It's really a win-win
to listen to.
Keep your mouth
feel
shut.
the need to talk. You don't have to.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. It'll probably be good for your voice.
Right. Okay. So you've been watching a little bit of Shogun, the new Hulu series. What's your take? How far are you into it at this point?
Well, at this point, this is. I'm sure there will be a little bit more out by the time this episode comes out. But probably not too much because episodes are coming out like once a week. The first 2 episodes are up right now. I like it. It's interesting. It's it's brutal from what I've heard, not nearly as brutal as the book.
Okay.
They do take some steps to make you kind of like the main the main guy Toranaga. They take some steps to maybe make you like him a little bit more. There's a moment where one of his servants does something, pulls a sword, and he's like, I will, allow me to like commit suicide and end my family line, right? Oof. So that would mean like killing his newborn son as well.
Those Japanese people are dramatic,
right?
Man.
And John Mark told me, he's like, in the book, he wouldn't let him commit suicide, which was very disgraceful, and they ended up like crucifying him upside down.
Because he didn't let him, or the guy? Oh, so he didn't let him kill himself, and they just tortured him instead.
And his own father was like, "Let me do it."
Oh man!
Right? It was wild.
Dang, dude.
And so, yeah, no, but otherwise it's pretty good. There's one thing I don't care for, and it's not all the time, but it is a good portion of the time. Um, when things are in focus and the background is blurry,
Uh-huh.
it's that
That's the
slight
field, right?
it's that slight fisheye blur that
Oh, so like the corners are hold
is
on.
ever so slight, that ever so slight like fisheye blur.
You
And
talking
it's
about it like
not
a vignette, like a darkness around the sides?
sometimes, but I mean, like, you remember how in Rebel Moon the
Mhm.
background was like almost fisheye warped
Yep.
blur. And I know the weird thing is, like, I know the backgrounds in this show are not always fake. I know there's a lot of like real practical effects, and a lot of real on location filming,
Sure.
right? Because they've shown other shots where it's like the trees and the village and everything, and you can tell obviously maybe like that ship is fake or that building is fake, but the environment isn't. So it's a little bit sometimes the shot will be perfectly clear,
Okay.
and then sometimes the shot will have that weird depth of field thing.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's different than depth of field. So depth of field is just focus and out of focus. Um,
right.
the what you're talking about is probably, I'm guessing, it's on shots that are at a wider angle. So
Not
not zoomed
always.
in, not close up, but I'm talking about like the lens itself. So there's a difference between a close up and a close up wide
Mhm.
angle, you know? So a close up wide angle. So right now my lens is at 18 millimeters. That's pretty wide, right?
Yeah,
And I use it to show the room and everything. So a close up wide angle is like when you take a wide angle and get close.
right.
A close up would be me sitting back here, just zoomed and zoom in or pull the camera or, to change the millimeter focal length of
Mhm.
the lens to like 50 or something. And then
Yeah.
it changes also even how I look and how thick or skinny I look or whatever. Um, so what you're saying is that when you go to grade it, sometimes people do it artificially or sometimes it's in the lens. If you're at a wider angle, it
Mhm.
can, and use a specific lens, it can make the corners of your frame kind of like have almost this pooling blur effect.
Yeah.
Um, and then they also will add vignettes. It's a stylistic choice to bring your attention to the center. And it's more, you see it more done in modern filmmaking. We saw it a lot in the Batman as well.
See, I just that I think that's my only complaint with the show,
It's too much of
really,
that.
is it's a lot of that. And so where I feel like the show should feel more large in scope,
Yeah.
I feel very close often,
Mhm.
and not able to look and see things that I want to see. I want to see the people. I want to
Yeah.
see the environment, you know. And I get it for things where it's like, okay, we have to have this shot, and in the background there's two ships that aren't actually there. Yes, I understand like having it there. I understand the ships are there. But when we're on like a real set with real people, I want to
Sure.
see everything.
So you feel like it's messing with the window into the world.
A little bit,
Yeah.
just a little bit. And so when it's not there, I feel like it's like, wow, I feel really
Like in Dune,
yeah.
right? Like Dune, especially in bright environments, you don't want to do that.
Mhm.
In dimly lit, it can become an interesting stylistic choice because you can kind of, if it's already, the background's already dark, the image is already pretty dark, you can say, all right, so the corners don't matter that much. We can pull even more
Mhm.
focus by adding a vignette or that kind of blur wide angle corner effect, to pull people to the center because those don't matter at all and it's already dark.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas, like, if it's a dark image, but like there's a corner what seems a little bright, then it just becomes distracting.
Yeah.
But in a bright environment, when they're outside in the middle of the desert in Dune, you want that window to be clear. Like you want that
Right.
when all the corners, everything needs to be whoosh. We're seeing into the world through this
Mhm.
window, and you're saying like in Shogun, they're just doing it as like a stylistic choice kind of across the board, you know?
Yeah, at weird times too. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Um, but yeah, otherwise I like the show. I thought a lot of the interactions between characters are really good.
Mhm.
Um, the guy who plays John Blackthorne is very good.
Okay.
Like,
Very good.
oh yeah, yeah. The way he speaks, the way he speaks to people, the way that he interacts with the people around him,
Yeah.
um, is very good. And he's doing I think the actor has a somewhat deeper voice, but he's doing an older style of like um uh almost higher British accent,
Yeah.
but it's really good, and he does it very well.
That's great to hear. So overall, it's less brutal. There's an annoying cinematic
It is
effect, but
brutal though.
yeah, less brutal than
That
the book.
less brutal than the book. Still a brutal show.
Right. I wanted to quickly touch on this because this is interesting. So last weekend, Dune and The Chosen entered the theaters. The last two episodes of The Chosen, and they've been doing this rollout all month, and it looks like they've done some pretty good earnings.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Definitely. So, like in the first couple episodes, they pulled in like it was like 7 million, and then the next week they pulled in I think like close to 4 million or 5 million,
Mhm.
and then in this week it seems like it's a little bit less. Full disclosure, recording it while it's currently in theaters, but
Right.
also there's the Dune pool, so um, they probably will make up for it some next week. But The Chosen is doing pretty well in theaters for season 4, and it's an interesting new look to release an entire show in theaters.
Mhm.
And I know we've discussed this quite a few times, but since we're coming to a close of this theatrical run for The Chosen, do you think we're going to see any other shows kind of say, "Hey, we're going to do a couple episodes here and there in a theater"? Like,
I wouldn't be surprised.
it almost like, do you think they would do a Stranger Things run in the theaters?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did
Probably not
something like that.
Netflix. They didn't even release Rebel Moon to theaters.
Right. Yeah. I think if the studios are smart, they'll look at this kind of release and be like, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe we should release Roadhouse in theaters and not just keep it on Amazon Prime."
Right, right. I think the Chosen has is a really awesome proof of concept for
Mhm.
releasing shows in a theater, and it actually kind of extends the amount of people are talking about it because you do like 3 episodes at once, and then the
Yeah.
next 3 episodes, and then the last 2 episodes if you have an 8
Mhm.
episode kind of thing. Um, and it's a proof of concept because sometimes these shows like Shogun are going up on streamers, and then what? You know what I mean? Like, I know they make advertisement because they run ads, but for like Netflix, it goes up on Netflix. They just keep bringing in the money they make every month anyway. You know what I mean?
Well, we were talking about this. So I think the streaming um they my brother asked, he's like, why are they doing this like one episode a week thing? And we were talking about it, like the places like Netflix that drop all of their content at once,
Hmm.
people don't talk about those shows for very long
No, we're already
after.
done talking about Avatar: The Last
Yeah,
Airbender.
because it's all out. People. Well, I think people are going to talk about it for a little bit longer, dissect it a little bit more,
Fans, but not
and
like the
then
people that
yeah,
like
but
us, right?
yeah, but shows that drop an episode
Hmm.
a week, those last much longer because people will dissect each episode as it comes out. People will make videos as it comes out, um, and you get we saw this with um Rings of Power and with House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
Because they were both coming out at the same time. And then I think earlier that summer, or maybe it was later the next year, Stranger Things season 4 dropped. Was it 4? 3?
I think it's 4.
4.
Yeah,
Right.
I think you're right.
And it all dropped at once, except there was like, I think 2 episodes that we had to wait for later.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, they did a 2-parter, right? Stranger Things season 4 part 1, where it's like 6 episodes, and then part 2, and then they do 2 more episodes, but one of the episodes is like 2 hours long.
Right. Which, you know, it all comes out basically at once. People talk about it and then they move on.
Yeah.
Whereas if your show is coming out, if you got 10 episodes, you know,
I mean, friggin' let this conversation last for 10 weeks if your show's
Exactly.
good enough. If your
Yeah.
show's good enough, because obviously Rings of Power, huge fall off. She-Hulk, huge fall off. People stopped watching. Loki didn't make a splash. People watched the first episode and stopped watching.
Right. Yeah, they all drop at the same time, and then, you know, people don't talk about it.
Yeah. And so I would say if you have something like a House of the Dragon, if you have something like The Chosen, even because even though they already did a theatrical run, yeah, keep the conversation, which The Chosen will do that, by the way. They do release it on the app in parts. But do it all, let people talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, and if people don't talk about it and it flops and people aren't even showing up next week for your next episode, it's a good indicator to the industry what's working and what isn't, and if you made something good or not. And I think that's important data. You know what I mean? As opposed to trying to fake it, fudge the numbers, and then do a season 2 when no one's asking for it.
Right. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like the only people that are interested in a season 2 for Rings of Power are the people that are going to slam it and get YouTube
Oh,
views.
man. Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
That's the only reason I'm excited for Rings of Power season 2 is because I want to see all the stupid things they did, make videos about it.
The only problem with that is that I want to do that. Yeah. Right. I want to talk about it, but I know that I'll have to sit down and watch the show and
just cringe out for an hour and be upset.
It
really creates upsetting feelings.
Right. But I feel like people want to hear about what the conversation is around that. I think there's a lot of people that don't want to watch the show.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. I think it's been delayed. I don't think it's coming out this year anymore.
Oh man. Nobody's gonna watch it.
But we're still getting House of the Dragon this summer, so that'll be great. I want to talk briefly about this idea around filmmakers, specifically Denis Villeneuve. And I want to watch a clip where he makes a statement that reminds me of somebody. Another statement that another director made. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch this clip real quick.
Creative liberty that you've taken in the movie, actually, that scene, right, which is not in the books.
Yes.
Are you scared of upsetting hardcore book fans when you take these liberties?
No, because an adaptation is like in between the movie and the book, there's me. And I make thousands, millions of tiny decisions in order to bring it to the screen. And I'm fully responsible. If they don't like something, it's my fault. But all those decisions have been made with as an act of love toward Frank Herbert, because you cannot translate directly the book to the screen. So in order my main objective was to make sure that I was absolutely respectful to the main message of Frank Herbert, and I made all those decisions with massive respect toward him.
I love the respect that you have to put.
So that's the main clip. Does it remind you of anything?
I think I know exactly what you're getting at here.
What does it remind you of?
It's that interview with Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
He's like, we are just trying to respect Tolkien's work. We want
and what he cared about the messages of his story.
Yeah, the message of Tolkien's work, right? So yeah, for Denis Villeneuve to change things, which we know that he has done, which you know,
but Peter Jackson did also with Lord of the Rings.
Change characters, change how, you know, people do things or how people look or whatever. I always said as long as it stays true to the original concept of what was in the book.
Yeah.
For example, I think the big one that people will notice from the first movie is like Liet Kynes.
Yep.
The change of Liet Kynes from a male to a female, no matter what race, is it would only be intrusive if it changed the character of Liet Kynes, right? And I don't believe it did. As long as it stays true to who the character was.
Yeah,
then,
she fulfilled the same moments, the same role, the same story, the same ending of that character's story, whether it was a man and or a woman, and they didn't gender swap and change the character, like to match it more of a female character.
To make her like, more female.
The only thing I think they changed with that is that doesn't she say that she had a husband who was Fremen die, right?
Yeah. Well,
so that's the only difference. I'm sure in the books, do you know, does Liet Kynes' wife who was Fremen die?
I think so.
It's very similar, but it ultimately doesn't change the character's motivations or what they can do for the story.
Right. Know? Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't change like Paul's decision. It doesn't change Shawnee's decisions. Because she's they didn't make it super clear that Shawnee is Kynes' daughter.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that at all.
You didn't.
I didn't know that at all. I watched the movie so many times.
Even in the promotional material, it says Shawnee Kynes.
Nope, missed it. Overlooked that little detail.
Yeah,
I thought Shawnee was just a random little Fremen girl.
Yeah,
that really expands the story for me.
Yeah. But it doesn't change in the it doesn't change the character. It's
right.
Chani was Kynes' daughter in the book,
and once Kynes dies, Chani is making decisions not based around her parents. It's based around herself and Paul and everything. And so it doesn't change her character either. To have it be her mom rather than her dad, I guess.
Right.
So with this, I want to just go build off of this premise, okay, that I don't think Hollywood does not know how to make Dune. They can't make Lord of the Rings. Hollywood can't make a Chris Nolan film. You know what I mean? And the reason why I'm saying this is because obviously they are being operated and funded inside the Hollywood system. However, the Hollywood system is built around standard practices, built around throwing money at it. It's built around hiring for what the modern audiences want. You know what I mean? And when it comes down to it, Hollywood can't make these masterfully done films. The only ones that are making them, interestingly enough, are the directors who also helped produce the film, who also was the primary editor or one of the primary editors for the story or the adaptation, right? Or writers anyway. So there's like a process that only Hollywood doesn't know how to make these movies. The creatives know how to make the movies. And unless the creative is backing this. So Denis Villeneuve wrote the screenplays for the adaptation for the first Dune and the second. All right. Peter Jackson obviously, he co-wrote the adaptation from the books. And he also produced and directed it. And then Chris Nolan writes his own films. So what do all these great filmmakers have in common is my question, you know? And it seems pretty obvious. it seems pretty obvious that Hollywood's not the one making this happen because there's been so many failures. I don't know.
Mhm.
Do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on this?
It doesn't seem like there are writing teams that are working on this adaptation. It feels like as a director, I need to adapt this from the source material with probably other writers, yes, but in a way that when I'm directing, I know what to direct because I
Yeah.
know what I'm writing.
Because you're
And I
so
know,
close to it, right?
yeah, because and yeah, you're close to the source material. And yeah, I think you're right. It does feel very much like a standard Hollywood studio wouldn't know how to make this. It's interesting though
Well,
how
if a studio said, "We want to make Dune. Let's hire the best director for this." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Let's figure out who's going to produce it. Let's hire writers, to get this
Yeah.
done, and everyone's separated, and it's just we're throwing money at it, and we're going to get this made.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good. It's only
Mhm.
good because Denis Villeneuve cares, and he's the one who pulled it off the ground, and he's the
Yeah.
one who wrote the adapted screenplay, and he's the one directing it, and he's the one help co-producing it. And
But it's so interesting to me how Hollywood it feels because of how many big names. It was my worry going into the first movie. I was like, okay, so they hire Oscar Isaac, they hire
Jason Momoa,
Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya's, Josh Brolin,
yep,
what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy?
yeah,
Dave Bautista, Skarsgård,
yeah,
like
Stellan
Richard
Skarsgård.
Ferguson, all of these big names.
Mhm.
And I was just like, man, this is really going to be the Hollywood Dune movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then and then I watch it and I was like, wow, that was really good. I'm glad that I feel like these actors did a good job in these roles. It didn't just feel like star power
Right.
performances, right? And then the next movie, there's like Austin Butler, Florence Pugh. Like,
We're doing it again.
Here we go again. But
and freaking Christopher Walken.
It feels like big Hollywood,
sure,
in the casting, but it doesn't feel like big Hollywood in the writing and in the way that they do the movie.
Yeah, this is an interesting point when it comes to actors and choices for actors. So Hollywood knows how to hire big actors for their project.
Yeah,
but if you're smart, so do directors. So and casting directors. There's this. We had him on the podcast years ago, but his name's Alex Ferrari, and he talks about in the indie film market how the indie film market clamors to get a star.
Yeah.
Because if you can get a star, a recognizable face, that will sell your show. Because people that are fans, that's a big portion of the selling. All right. So people that are fans of those actors will watch your film. So if they've never heard of you, if they don't care about your project, if they don't know, you don't have a studio that's promoting it, your star can promote it. So Hollywood just does that on a bigger scale. And if you think about it, Peter Jackson did it. I mean, Sean Austin, Elijah Wood, these have been child actors. They were already very well established. Viggo Mortensen, they called him as a secondary choice, but they were like, we must have this guy. Like, we really want this guy,
Right.
And then obviously you have the Indiana Jones guy. I can't ever remember his name. I don't know why I can't remember his name.
The Indiana Jones guy?
Yeah, the guy who plays an Indiana Jones, who plays Gimli.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The only kind of fresh face was Orlando Bloom, and he was simultaneously running with pirates.
Hugo Weaving was in stuff in Matrix.
Right.
So
Sir
he
Ian
he
McKellen.
was recognized at that point. Yeah, Ian McKellen, Sean Bean.
Yes.
Yeah, lots of
And it
big
also,
names. Yeah, Christopher Lee.
yeah. And then looking, so you have all of these well-established stars acting in your film. Chris Nolan does the same thing. We saw a packed star cast with Oppenheimer, and we
Oh
see a
yeah.
packed star cast with most of his films.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the way back to The Prestige, all the way back to Batman Begins.
Yeah.
He was throwing in big stars, and
Yeah, Liam
I think,
Neeson.
yeah, Liam Neeson, Christian Bale, all of these big people, and then in some fashion, a director knows I need to hire the best performer, but
Mhm.
getting onto actors some, I think most actors, if they're acting on a high level, can act your story.
Yeah.
It's really what's given to them and then what's dictated to them on set, ultimately.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I think
Timothy
we just
Chalamet can act an awesome Paul Atreides, and I think in Dune Part 2, his performance is so awesome compared to even Dune Part 1. But Timothy Chalamet can act a really good Paul Atreides. He can also act a Willy Wonka that's not amazing. It
Did
comes
you
down to
watch
which.
Willy Wonka?
Not yet.
Okay.
Am I
I
wrong with that? I'm not
it's
getting the
not
sense that it's
okay,
amazing.
it's not that bad.
Okay. Maybe it's a bad example.
I think if you're if you're watching it wrong, if you're watching it more like this is sort of kind of like a theater play, it's a little bit more enjoyable.
Okay.
No, I think we disassociate. Like we see this. Here's an actor who's a huge name, getting paid tons of money.
Yeah.
Super famous, right? But that's
Sure.
the problem. We see super famous, and we're like, okay, this is just going to be another, one of their movies. But I think we need to. I get this thing where it's like it's still an actor. They're still an
Yeah.
actor.
And they're
So-
usually a good big actor because they know how to act, with the exception of a few Brie Larsons out there. But most actors know how to act. Most actors know how to act what's given to them. It's just a matter of what's given to them and what is the
Mhm.
director. How are they pulling that performance out of them on set? You know,
Right.
and my goodness, so we're seeing a common thread here. And I think it ultimately comes down to Hollywood solves problems with money,
Yeah.
and creative solves problem with hard work and respect and creativity. And
Mhm.
when it comes to filmmaking, that's what we want to see. I mean, let's take what's like a low budget, don't use -1 as an example, but what's like a low budget series or film that people love? I don't know. I could go back to The Chosen, but that's a little bit different because that's about Jesus,
Yeah.
so it has a baked-in audience.
Let's see.
I don't know. There's a lot of examples of lower budget stuff. Like take Stranger Things season 1. Didn't have a huge budget, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But people loved it because the kid actors were amazing. The story was well told. It wasn't cheesy. It
Mhm.
kind of got cheesy a little bit down the road for some reason, but it wasn't cheesy. It was a well told thriller, kind of mind bending story,
Yeah.
and it didn't have a huge budget season 1. But you don't need a huge budget to solve your problem or to make something amazing. And you really just need the best people on it. And this kind of motivates the point,
Yeah.
like people are watching movies because of who made them, right? Not because of necessarily who's in them. Yes, who's in them is a big factor, but who makes them is so important, and who
Right.
wrote the adaptation, who wrote the script. It's like we're going to see movies because of Chris Nolan and Denis Villeneuve. We're not going to
Mm.
see movies because of the black lady that was hired, the under resumed. I don't know, the under.
Right.
She doesn't have a lot of skill. Her experience is very limited. Who did the Marvels? You know, we're not
Right.
going to see her movies.
Right. Yeah. I don't. People aren't going to see those. People never went to see Marvel movies because of their directors.
Yeah.
And
But in some
I think
fashion, we kind of feel like in hindsight we did because we were on that Jon Favreau train, you know?
yeah, but nobody was like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to go see that Jon Favreau film that happens to be a
Sure.
superhero movie,"
But
right?
in hindsight, we know
or
what
like,
made it good.
I
Right?
really love the Russo brothers. You know, I really appreciate their work. You know, and I'm going to see their new Avengers: Infinity War film.
Yeah.
Right? People were saying, I'm going to see Avengers: Infinity War. You know,
I don't
and
know who directed it.
I mean, I know the Russo brothers did, but
Sure, but most people didn't.
I knew that they were involved with a lot of other Marvel stuff. These directors are making the films that are going to be remembered.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're also making the films that are defining this age of filmmaking because
Mhm.
so they're still making great films, but you have the legendary directors like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and them. They're still making movies, but their movies are not as defining of the times, you
Right.
might say, as what a Chris Nolan and Denis Villeneuve is doing.
Yeah.
It's so much different. It's not defining of the times. These are this right now in cinema history. These are the directors, you know.
Mhm.
These
And
are
I
the
mean,
ones.
it comes down, I think, moments in movies. I think people are going to, I think people with Dune, with Dune Part 2, with these kinds of movies, it's the same thing that happened in Star Wars and in Batman. It's like, people are going to have their favorite moments in the movie. It's not just going to be because these movies are so long, and Lord of the Rings, there's so much movie there. You can't just be, every time you watch it, you're watching for specific moments.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like every watch you get a new moment. I love the moment in Two Towers when Gandalf rides up and Éomer comes out from behind him and
Sure.
they run down the hill. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes. It's awesome.
You want to know which director I actually happen to think might, whenever he gets a story that's going to be big like Dune, where he's doing an adaptation that's going to be amazing, and he's not just doing his own. I think so. Back in the day when Denis Villeneuve did like Prisoners, he was known in small communities. Now he's becoming a legendary household name, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a director out there that has done a couple bigger films, but it's still kind of in this era of his Prisoners stage. I think it's Gareth Edwards.
Okay.
Now, Gareth Edwards did the first. He did Rogue One, so the Star Wars that people somewhat enjoy. He also had to work with Disney on that, so I give him a pass. He did the first Godzilla.
Yeah.
And he just did The Creator. All right.
Right.
So I think whenever, and he's also not super old, like Gareth Edwards younger. I think when Gareth Edwards is given an opportunity that Denis Villeneuve is currently living in, I think he's going to blow us out of the water. I think he's going to be one of the next great directors as well that defines an era of cinema.
I think that I think the only issue I have with Edwards is I don't think his storytelling potential is super original. He in all three of those movies that you mentioned, he tends to follow similar story beats, which isn't always bad, but he doesn't always do them like the best, right? Whereas I feel like with Prisoners, it was
low budget, extremely indie style,
but very,
horror.
Yeah, but the story was very captivating,
compelling. Yeah. And then you also get into Blade Runner. A lot of people
yeah,
didn't
and
like
then
Blade Runner.
I just I don't know. You look at things, you look at stuff from Dune, the way that Villeneuve filmed
Mm-hmm.
scenes, and you can see the compassion and the care and the storytelling.
Yeah.
I caught a moment when I was watching it last that I didn't, and I've seen the movie a couple times, that I didn't notice before.
The first one?
Yeah, in the first one, when he calls Paul calls Gurney Halleck the old man.
Yep.
Right? And when he's in that trance as they're trying to save the transport, and Gurney is looking for him,
Mm-hmm.
he just whispers, "I recognize your footsteps, old man."
Yeah.
Right? Shai Hulud is old man for the Fremen, right? So the worm is coming.
Yeah.
Right?
It's almost like
Gurney's
a double meaning
looking
here.
for him. It's a huge double meaning.
Yeah.
And he's experiencing, the spice in his system.
Yeah.
It's one of the best moments.
When you think about it,
the
of
movie.
that, so it's kind of cheeky when he says it
Mhm.
in regarding Gurney Halleck. But when you
Yeah.
think about it as the worm, and the worm's on its way, and knowing what Paul is coming into and
What he's
becoming,
capable
and,
of.
and what
Yeah.
he's capable of, it almost becomes very ethereal and kind of
It is.
almost sinister, and almost like this weird supernatural connection to Arrakis when
Mhm.
he says, "I recognize your steps, old man." That's wow. That's
It's watch that scene again, knowing
knowing that little
that's the
detail.
translation, and knowing that whole interaction and everything. And yeah, you
And Dune
it
Part
gives you
2,
chills.
obviously, people who don't know the story, when you
Mhm.
see Dune Part 2, whether you've seen it in theaters yet or you haven't, it adds so many layers, just knowing not just Paul Atreides, but knowing Timothée Chalamet's adaptation of Paul
Mhm.
Atreides and Denis Villeneuve's adaptation. That can cause goosebumps, dude.
Yeah.
With that context. And
Yeah.
then so seeing Dune Part 2 and then having that context, it's amazing. But yeah, so just to close out this little conversation about Hollywood and directors, do you think there's any, obviously directors like this, we're just going to keep seeing successes and Hollywood's going to keep seeing failures. Is there
Right.
any course correction for the industry? Because these directors need the industry's money to make
Mhm.
these big things that they're doing.
Yeah.
But there's only a small handful of directors that are selling stuff. I mean, almost everything underperforms unless a big director does it, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't actually feel like I have a concrete answer on that, on what the solution is, because you're right. There's stuff failing left and right, but then every once in a while, a director, it's really become like a director that we recognize
Yeah.
drops something that we really like,
And then it blows the
or
box
like
office
somebody
out of the
like
water.
Tom Cruise or something.
Yeah. Maybe this, okay, so think about this. Business-wise, I think I have a solution here.
Okay.
If the director is unknown, but you still need to cultivate directors to see if they become great, green light $50 million. Green light $60 million projects. That's it.
Mm.
Do not give someone with hardly any experience directing and adapting and writing interesting stories. Do not give them $200 million. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just say, okay, this budget is not based on necessarily the story. It's not necessarily based on the actors. It really needs to be based around it needs to shift and say, doesn't matter who's in this movie necessarily. It doesn't matter all the factors that they traditionally use. Say,
Yeah.
who's the creatives? If it's Chris Nolan, drop the money. If it's Denis Villeneuve, drop the money. If it's a Gareth Edwards, give him $80 million and see what he does with it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
like he did with the creator, because they won. I mean, the creator won financially because it was only an $80 million budget.
Yeah.
So don't take chances and cultivate as an industry financially
Mhm.
the directors that have potential and elevate the ones that you already know work. And you have this perfect line that as a director gets more traction, they can work up this ladder, because so much of what people are watching these days is based entirely on who's making it,
Mhm.
you know? And
Yeah.
we're just more informed than ever. Maybe back in the old days of Hollywood, no one had the internet, so no one knew who made it to the commercial or to the credits. You know what I mean?
Right.
But or they had to read newspaper clippings or whatever they had back then.
Mhm.
But in the age of the internet, people are literally just saying, we're excited for this next. We're excited for Oppenheimer, not because we're like itching for a biopic story about the guy who invented the nuclear bomb.
Mhm.
We're not itching for that story as a culture, but we
Right.
are itching for the next Chris Nolan film.
The next Chris Nolan film.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. It's like people did people need Dune? Did people want Dune?
No.
I don't think it was on anybody's radar except for
The book
nerds and
fans.
fans were like, man, I was talking about I had read Dune a while ago, and
Sure.
I kept telling me and my brothers talked about it, and we were like, man, we really would love a good adaptation
Yeah.
of this book. And then finally we started seeing one, and we got really excited, and it felt like we were the only ones who really knew what it was or knew about it. And then even after the movie came out, people were kind of like, yeah, this is interesting. And it took a little while for
warm
the,
up.
to warm up. Yeah.
Yeah. They had to cook, essentially. The first movie had to cook a little bit,
Yeah.
and people came around, and yeah, I think the industry can course correct, and it's not a very big. It's not hard to do. I mean, you're already inflated, so you're going to have to downsize, which we're seeing companies do that. They're downsizing, they're laying off, they're dropping budgets. It's crazy what the industry is doing right now, but that's only because they've been inflated for so long.
Yeah.
And so you have to go through growing pains. But yeah, just take less chances on new people and take higher chances on the established ones.
And
that's what I think.
yeah, because the guys who are established will know exactly what to do with the money. They won't just drop dudes on a green screen.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with Timothy Chalamet talking about, I had this whole rig that I was on to, make it seem like I was on the back of a worm with the wind blowing on me and everything. And he's like, to really make it feel like it's real and not just, and it's, it's the same thing that they're doing it with the volume technology. It's like, okay, we can't just set somebody in front of this screen. We saw the behind the scenes with House of the Dragon. Get them on a saddle, splash them with water, throw as much wind on them as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And use the screens to make it feel like we're in clouds and in the sky.
Yeah, it always needs to motivate. You can't fix it in post because it comes across bad. That's just and people they have bigger budgets for production than they have for post production anyway. So if you say we're gonna fix it in post, well, guess what? You're spending the money now. You might as well do it right now. So anyway, we'll move on. I think we beat that horse a little heftily. Thank you, Cynthia. Almost an hour into the podcast. Thank you, Cynthia, for being a Patreon supporter. She enjoys the content over on Patreon, but if you don't prefer Patreon or you don't always use it, you can actually just join on YouTube right here on the YouTube channel. It's the same content, the same early access to podcasts, the same pre-show exclusive podcast we do before every single episode, and also just general cool little things here and there. It's only $3.99 a month. As I said last week, get your coffee and a membership because it's so cheap you can afford both.
Yeah.
People always say just skip coffee once a month, and it's like, no, don't do that. Get
Yeah,
both.
you don't have to. You can get both.
It's
You
so
can
cheap. You
both.
can get both.
Yeah.
Can have both. So $3.99 a month, you can enjoy our stuff. Thank you, Cynthia, for being a Patreon supporter. Kick us into this next realm here, Wyatt.
Yeah, and that's a great way of saying it. So I was thinking about I was let's see, what was I watching yesterday?
Shogun.
I was watching Shogun, yes. And I watched Blackberry. I watched The Blob. No, that
Okay.
was yeah.
You had a little movie day yesterday.
I think I watched The Blob the day before.
Okay.
No. Yes. I think I did. And just thinking about different movies, thinking about different things we could talk about. And I kind of landed on the idea of the 70s, not 70s, but 80s to 90s
Sure.
martial arts films
Okay.
in America.
All right.
I'm sure you remember Karate Kid was huge.
Yes.
We got a lot of movies like Beverly Hills Ninja and what was that? Miami Connection. We had in the 80s and 90s, we got, a few good like American martial arts films.
Yep.
And lots of really bad American like, American Ninja movie. Right? It was very I don't know. It almost felt racially motivated.
I'll let you control the slides because I want you to tee up what you're doing.
Well,
so I think you could switch.
I kind of want to discuss sort of the loss of the American
Karate
arts film.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because we get so many action movies, martial arts action movies, but for some reason that sort of in America and martial arts, I don't know. It's this weird dichotomy that we've lost.
Okay.
I don't
think it was lost. I think it was replaced, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point because I don't know if you remember Three Ninjas.
I might have watched this when I was really young. I don't remember. It looks kind of familiar.
These are the types of movies that, lots of them were made for kids,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a capitalization on martial arts, which in the 80s and 90s everybody was into.
Yep.
It was this huge push in the 80s and 90s of martial arts. People doing martial arts for health, for I don't know, to maybe try to find something.
The respect.
I don't know.
No, people were going to school knowing a few basic moves for the respect.
Not even just respect, but like America had sort of reached this stage during that times where what's the word I'm looking for? People didn't do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Complacency was
Sure.
at a high.
Okay.
Everybody has all of the conveniences in the 80s and 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not nearly as many today, but people were trying to cope with the fact that I have all of the time in the world and my children have all of the time in the world. How do I focus this energy? And so you would put them in Taekwondo or karate or something. And then people who are older were like, I need something I can, I can use to fill my time and try to maybe find myself a little bit. And they found it in martial arts.
and movies in particular motivated that.
And the
It-
movies, I don't know that the movies motivated it as much. I think they capitalized on it.
okay, maybe
I
have
think the
a
movies
feeling that
capitalized on the push for martial arts.
it's hard to say because I wasn't there, but my
Mhm.
gut says that these martial art films caused people to do martial arts.
See, Hollywood is always reactive.
Sure,
They're
somewhat.
always reactive to the culture. They're never like. There are some cases where the things that they do are influencing what's happening in the culture, but more often than not, they're reacting, and
Okay.
then later on, it becomes part of the pop culture. I think they're reacting to the big push.
Mhm.
And I'm actually curious. I have this one. Okay, so Rush Hour is not as much of the martial arts,
Yeah.
right? I'm talking, so specifically what I'm talking with those movies is the American characters find martial arts. This is a buddy cop film with martial arts in it.
Mhm.
I just grabbed it because there is quite a lot of martial arts in in these movies.
Yeah. So are we trying to dissect why? Are we
I
trying to
want to know
dissect why it happened, or
not why it happened. I want to know why it's not
why it's
still
gone?
happening.
Okay, so
Because
this is
it was kind of a big genre of
yeah.
movies was the American martial arts film.
Where'd it go? What happened?
Yeah.
I think so. It's hard to say because there's a big gap here.
Mm-hmm.
But if it wasn't for there's plenty of fighting movies, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of skill fighting movies. And it has to do less with the martial arts, like Asian influence kind of fighting. So
Mm-hmm.
take John Wick as an example.
Yeah.
John Wick is a very skilled fighter. He definitely knows martial arts, forms of it, mixed martial arts. But ultimately, he's pulling from so much to be the most skilled fighter ever, right?
Right.
And I think that became very attractive in Hollywood. Like, as I said, there's a big gap from when they stopped doing the American karate films to when stuff like John Wick was coming out. But I think it could have had an insurgence if we weren't pushing for this modern day type fighting films or almost just say badass films. You have things like Rambo, okay?
Mhm.
So Rambo was just a fighter who was good at what he does. He was bloodthirsty. He was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't doing karate kicks and stuff.
Right.
He was just a bear fighting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in some ways that I think that spoke to American culture more because also think about like American values. So especially for men, we're like, we're big, we're hefty, we're men, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And martial arts, unless you just love Asian culture, doesn't speak to our culture. We have to reference Asian culture so much just to get that point across or just to make films like this. I mean, even like the hayas and everything. This
Mhm.
guy in this picture looks like he's saying haya in the middle of his
Oh yeah,
kick.
he absolutely is.
But we don't have to just constantly live in that other culture because the American culture in America is more valuable than Asian culture in America. It
Mhm.
just is. And so we prefer movies of Rambos who just know how to fight and gets the job done dirty and hard and
Yeah, but
as everyone's scared of him. You know what I mean?
there was such a push in, especially in like the 90s. In the 90s they moved away from the martial arts I think movies, but they still had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, because it's in the name. They got to be ninjas.
And I mean they had all sorts of like samurai ninja stuff in the 90s.
It's grown. I mean, yeah, samurais and ninjas are a aspect of mixed martial arts.
Mhm.
but even with samurais, you're adding the element of swords and warfare and interesting politics even. And so I don't know. I think it's been replaced with more of an American version of how we fight. Like if you think of a Navy SEAL, how does he fight? Like that's what got America's
Okay,
interest.
so
It's
you're
like
thinking
soldier man, American soldier man. You
the
know what I
way
mean?
that the way people view martial arts has changed as well. People
Yeah.
aren't as interested in the karate or the kung fu, and you follow this aspect of the martial art all the way to the end to become a master.
Mm-hmm.
People are more interested in mixed martial arts and, doing anything and everything you have to or need to in order to win the fight.
Because in a lot of these movies, the karate is a character,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
The fighting style is a character. And I think they moved away from saying, we don't want this to be a character. We want our characters to be the characters. So the characters know how to fight and the characters
Right.
have a mixed bag of what they pull from, but we don't make the fighting a character in the way that the Karate Kid, the karate itself is a character,
I would say the last big kind of like American martial arts film was probably The Karate Kid with Jackie Chan, Jaden Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe Kung Fu
And it was
Panda.
a remake, so it almost doesn't
and that
count.
was a remake. And then probably Kung Fu Panda. I'd say the first Kung Fu Panda follows a lot of the martial arts film tropes.
But if it wasn't funny and done in animated in a funny fashion, telling an interesting, humorous story, would just an animated movie about kung fu, if it didn't have the element of Jack Black humor, would it have been as successful?
Probably not. I don't know.
Exactly, because we've moved away from this idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's a Karate Kid with Jackie Chan's. That's a remake. It doesn't count. They were capitalizing on the original Karate Kid success to try to sell that film. Right?
Yeah. And even Cobra Kai, I don't think people watched it for the martial arts aspect. I think
they watched it because of Karate Kid.
People started watching it because they were interested in the way that they were telling the story from the perspective of the other character.
Yeah.
Of the bully character, right? And it was less about the karate itself and more about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now there's just
the next fighting film, right, that's coming out is freaking Roadhouse, the remake of Roadhouse. They're doing a new
Roadhouse
take.
Was never about like martial arts,
but it's fighting, right?
Yeah,
and they're adding the element of like the UFC, which is modern. And it's the UFC is a huge bag of what fighting you're doing there, right?
Yeah.
People just use karate or taekwondo elements. They also use Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They also just use even boxing influences the UFC. It's such a mixed bag of fighting styles that it's become like this almost, I don't know if the UFC is exclusively American, but it's become this more American version of what's interesting with fighting.
Right.
And so do you have a theory of what movies or what movement shifted us away from this? Like a specific theory about it?
I think the main one is kids, especially kind of as the 2000s hit, martial arts wasn't as important to kids and families. They kind of moved away from the idea of one martial art, learning one martial art. I think and I think the importance moved away from it to more of general martial arts, mixed martial arts. And I think people just didn't really care about, I think that part of martial arts was that people, gosh, my nose is itchy. People, I'm itching it a lot, and people are going to be like, man, he's really touching his nose all the time. No, it's itchy as heck right now. the thing about the martial arts is it's also kind of a lifestyle,
Okay.
right? And so you're sort of
Oh yeah, it's a story about a lifestyle. That's a good
yeah,
way to put it.
you wanna live, you wanna kind of follow tenets and things, if you're really into it. And I think people just didn't want to get that into it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And there's a lack of interest. Now
Mhm.
here's the more interesting question. Do you think there's which do you think wins right now? Because
Mm,
these are two genres that had a big heyday and then dropped
mhm.
off. Do we think that right now the karate or martial arts, Asian influence type stories are more popular now or westerns? Which one are bigger? Is
I
bigger?
think westerns.
Western's bigger right now.
Yeah.
We're back to western again probably because
Mhm.
well, there are certain stories and certain
And I
actors and
so
creators that are
I do
making it
think
popular
I
again.
do think it's possible for the martial arts movies to swing back around.
But do we want it? Do we want it
Yeah,
to?
I do. I wanna see
Okay.
I do. I wanna see somebody do something akin to, um, the old Bruce Lee movies where he would just fight through people for some reason,
Mhm.
right?
I
It's
don't
like,
know.
I
I'm
got this goal. I wanna see look, I wanna see people on the street break out in, martial arts and start fighting each other.
I'm gonna be honest.
I always loved the idea.
I've never I can't say I'm would be sold on that idea.
Mm,
I would honestly rather watch John Wick.
okay.
I would rather
Understandable.
watch Rambo. I'd rather watch a really awesome like okay, so I watched Guy Ritchie's The Covenant
Mhm.
with Jake Gyllenhaal recently. I'd rather watch like a really awesome kind of Navy SEAL army guy kind of story. It
Okay.
just it's there's fighting, there's survival, there's good guys, there's bad guys.
The culture never hit you growing up. The
Mm,
ninja culture.
no, I
Ninjas
was on
ninjas and martial arts
well,
never really got you,
Ninja
right?
Turtles got me. I think
Ninja
Karate
Turtles,
Kid got
yeah.
me. All right, but no, all of these spin-offs, all of the Jackie Chan like comedy karate movies never got me.
Man, there were so many movies in the 90s about being a ninja, about being just with the worst dialogue too. Be
I
like,
think
"Oh, damn,
yeah.
you're a ninja? Damn, you a American ninja?"
Yeah. I think honestly, there's just way too much nuance with that culture now
Mhm.
that you don't have to just be like, "Oh, kicks and karate chops and punches." It's not about that. There's so much nuance now that it would almost be extremely limiting to create a story about it today
I think
because
they could do it. I think what they would have to do is really capitalize on the 90s ninja nostalgia,
Mhm.
really capitalize hard on it and somehow make it work to not only um not only feel like that era, but also feel like a legitimate like martial arts movie. I've seen a couple of martial arts movies attempt to bring that feeling back.
Which
Um,
ones?
let's see. I watched the one. The one I'm thinking of is I think it's called Paper Tigers on Netflix.
Okay.
They did a pretty decent attempt of making it feel like uh, those old kind of
Right.
martial arts type movies.
But it doesn't catch. It's not catching in culture.
No.
It hasn't yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is go back to the other conversation. Just say, all right, throw 20 million at a decent mid director,
Mhm.
see what happens. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like just try it a couple times. Don't invest too heavily in it. See if it catches because if your suspicion's correct, then it's
And
something to capitalize on now.
we're already seeing people experiment with the movie genres and what people enjoyed, nostalgia
Mhm.
as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a push for some of the 90s nostalgia, especially now. because people in the 90s are, people born in the 90s and grew up in the 90s are in their 30s and 40s now.
Mhm.
If you start making movies that appeal to that kind of nostalgia, like if they could do good Ninja Turtle stuff, right? It seems
Yeah.
like every Ninja Turtle thing they've made has been kind of crap.
Yeah. It's not been crap. It doesn't work all the time.
So the issue with like Seth Rogen's Ninja Turtles is he tried to appeal to pop culture, the same way that Spider-Verse did,
Yeah.
and it worked for Spider-Verse, but he tried to appeal to pop culture by referencing a lot with the turtles, and not
Making April unattractive. Wrong
Well,
move.
not referencing 90s culture,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Not referencing 90s culture and not referencing 90s martial arts enough.
Sure.
That's what it should have been. That's what they really should have been doing. That's what people loved about the Ninja Turtles. It was the 90s and it was sick martial arts.
Yeah.
And it
You know
was
what I was just
pizza and
thinking?
skateboarding.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking about? I'm thinking about April a lot these days. And I'm just kind of thinking like it was such a lost opportunity because there's so many great examples of attractive animated characters. I mean, if April just looked a little bit more Mrs. Fantastic. No, not Miss Fantastic. Miss Incredible, right? Just a little bit more Miss Incredible.
Yeah. Oh,
It would have been perfect. We would have loved it.
Modern studios are they're missing out on design, because it's not just men who like attractive female characters. Women like attractive female characters too,
because they aim to be like. And the thing is, you can have a lot of different varieties of attraction, right? But making April just kind of
a potato,
just a potato.
Yeah.
No, that was a wrong move, because she's supposed to be like even for the turtles, she's supposed to be the muse, you might say. And even for
absolutely.
turtles,
right?
Mutant turtles, she's supposed to be the kind of like
you were as a viewer of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you were supposed to watch it and be like, I wish I was a mutant ninja turtle. I wish I, a teenager, was a mutant ninja turtle.
Yeah.
And as a teenager, I also wish I could do martial arts and hang out with April.
Yeah, exactly.
The show, the concept really did a lot. They were like, also, here's Casey. He's a vigilante, just like the turtles. You were like, sick. I would love to hang out with him. And then they were like, and here's this like wise father figure. And then as a kid, you were like, yes.
Yeah, wise.
Yes, I do need to control my impulses.
Right.
Right? The show really had everything. The comics, they really really had everything you needed as a kid to be like, yeah, this is what I want.
I wonder if Gareth Edwards could make a really awesome Ninja Turtles movie.
Probably.
You think Gareth Edwards could probably really take off if he did
they've really
Turtles?
given it to the wrong people. They've given it to Michael Bay and Seth Rogen.
That wrong move.
The worst people to be given it to. Give it to somebody who understands.
Well, both of their brains, in two different directions, by the way, but both of their brains are way too out there. There's something about living in reality and being a Ninja Turtle. You have to ground it a little bit.
You really do. It has to. The cartoon felt like too much pop culture, too much modern woke culture, not enough 90s martial arts, and there's this theme in the 90s culture of like martial arts and mysticism and but also like but also like skateboarding and pizza in New York.
Dude, I freaking love pizza. I want
It's
pizza so
awesome.
bad.
It's such this weird mixture of cultures.
Dude, and occasionally they throw out a cowabunga.
And I don't know. I don't know how you mess up that idea.
You gave it to the wrong people. That's
Mhm.
that's ultimately, you gave it to someone who's an edgy woke comedian,
Mhm. Yeah, not even a very
And-
good one.
and then you also gave it to someone who goes way too hard with everything.
Mhm.
Everything goes way too
No,
hard with
that's
everything.
there's nothing to say the Ninja Turtles can't be awesome. How did
No.
we gotta move on from the Ninja Turtles.
Okay. I don't know where I did have an interesting thought that I was going to bring up, but it's escaped me because you got too far down the rabbit trail.
Yeah,
Got too far down the turtle hole,
the turtle hole.
the turtle sewer, or
Yeah.
the sewer hole. But with that, I guess it may come back, it may not. I don't think it's interesting enough to have a huge resurgence in culture like we did.
Mm.
The karate movies, possibly, but I don't think one movie could even get us back to where we were. As we kind of finish up, I did want to bring up a little bit of interesting film news that will really affect us all, I think.
Okay.
And involves around the city of Atlanta.
Mhm.
So you may not live in Atlanta, you may not care, but I'll
Beautiful
let me
picture, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
Atlanta has some beautiful,
and it's a good thing it's far out 'cause you can't see the like chicken bones and stuff on the street corners.
chicken bone.
I'm not joking.
Okay. Look, Atlanta compared to a lot of cities is very beautiful. It's a very beautiful city. I mean, shake your head. Yes. How many big cities have you been to? It's way
couple.
more beautiful than New York.
New York at least
It's way
has
more beautiful than LA and San Francisco.
New York at least has like scope, a
It's
just
way more
massive,
beautiful.
massive city.
Look, Chicago
Oh yeah, it's
looks
better than
dirty
Chicago.
from the sky. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? I mean, what?
Yeah, no,
No, look,
Chicago's bad.
there are some beautiful cities, and Atlanta's not on the list of the worst ones. It just isn't. You could disagree. It doesn't matter. It's not on the list of the worst ones. Now, here's why it's important to think about Atlanta for the film industry. Everyone has heard they film in Atlanta a good bit, okay?
Mhm.
But the reason why this is important is because it created about 15 years ago, it created a market opening to get rid of the Los Angeles, New York monopoly when it comes to
Right.
the film industry. And it created a really beautiful opening.
Mhm.
Atlanta, the city, was only selected because it is the biggest city in the state. It's the entire state of Georgia that you can operate in effectively. And they do.
Yeah.
They film all through Georgia. It's just Atlanta's the hub because it's the city of the state,
Mhm.
So there's been some voting, some talks of rather not good news
Okay.
around Atlanta's future. And a lot of people are concerned about this for the
Hmm.
film industry. So changes to Georgia TV film tax incentives adds extra hurdles for production companies. So the biggest concern, and honestly, this is a lot of tax talk that I don't fully understand. If I'm going to be 100% honest with you, this is a lot of conversations around what the percentages of freaking, I don't know, what's the word that they use, subsidizing and all this other stuff.
Right.
I don't understand all of it, but there's this recent news that let me see if this AP article helps us understand it. So Georgia is spending more than $1 billion subsidizing movie making. So I think what it's ultimately saying is that it's costing the state some money,
Right.
and they are arguing that it's hurting taxpayers.
Hmm.
But there are also counter arguments that says not true, because a huge percentage of the Georgia population now work in the film industry.
Yeah.
And so if the industry decides to leave because the state tightens their grip slightly on the
Mhm.
film industry, they might find a better competitor.
Yeah.
And so it's not even just saying it's like it's harming the taxpayer or or it's costing the state money. It's also saying like there's some element to this that they're saving money and can call it later, or like basically get discounts or write-offs or something later down the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're worried about them doing that all at once, and then it hits the Georgia economy a little too hard. But ultimately what they're saying is it's hugely expensive. The state is projected to give, okay, let's see. So the program has supported thousands of Georgian jobs and the creation of several thriving studios, but it's hugely expensive. The state is projected to give a $1.35 billion credit this year alone. Supporters of the measures say they want to preserve Georgia's film industry, but protect the state against a limitless liability.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically saying that they're raising the bar. I think there's like, so you get like a 30%. So Georgia grants income tax credits up to 30% for television film production in the state. So that's what got all of these companies and the studios to come to Georgia and to operate in Georgia.
Right.
And so much, almost most films do something in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
do something around Atlanta, whether it's they just edit it there, whether it's they film it there, whether they film out of one of Tyler Perry's studios there. You know what I mean? Like in a green screen or something. Most productions are doing something in Atlanta because of tax reasons. And basically they're saying that in order to get this 30%, there's going to have to be limitations to your production. And I think what the limitation is, so production companies in state, once a company spends at least $500,000, so they get this 30% credit if they're spending up anywhere over $500,000.
Right.
I believe what they're saying is they are raising that to $1 million.
Sheesh.
So you get the 30% credit if you're spending a minimum of $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's what the cap is. For the big film industry, for Hollywood, this doesn't really matter.
Right.
But there is a huge indie market and even television market in Atlanta that will take a big hit, because there are some television series that do like 3 or 4 episodes that they got to deal with Hulu or something, or even like documentary filmmaking, right? That's a big part of it, that don't have $1 million budget. They might have $100,000. So essentially this is raising the cap on a big section of the market. And ultimately, I think the goal is to say, hey, we want to make sure big money's spent in the state, and we don't want to be giving tax credits to companies that aren't spending as much in the state.
Right.
So that's where it comes down to, because they, based on the credits, and this one over $1 billion is not based on anything except to say like, oh, what would we make if we didn't have this credit? You know what I mean?
Right.
But then it's not accounting for the fact that you wouldn't have it anyway if you didn't have the credit, because the film industry wouldn't have come to Georgia.
Right.
So they're saying the current industry, we're losing this much in tax revenue or whatever because of this credit. But it's like, it doesn't make sense logistically, because the lower you keep your rates as a state, the more business comes to you.
Right.
Like Hollywood will keep doing more and more, and even outside of Hollywood will keep doing more and more in Atlanta as the years go on. And it can become the epicenter of Hollywood in the next 5 to 10 years if you play it right.
Yeah, I think they need to. I think it's a perspective thing. They're thinking of the movie industry as something that is working in Atlanta, and they're not thinking about it as a part of the state.
Right.
And so they're
that's what Los Angeles did. Los Angeles and California we're movies. We make movies.
Yeah,
here.
we make movies, right?
We make movies, and
Atlanta's
wine.
like, oh, well, we're Atlanta, and sometimes people make movies here.
Yeah, no, you need it's a branding issue.
Yeah, they're the state isn't thinking of it in a way that is like positive towards it being like an establishment here.
Yeah. No, it is becoming an establishment, and it kind of already is if you allow it to flourish.
Yeah, they're like, we're not making as much money on this as we should be. How do we make money on this?
Look, you're going to lose a ton of money if the industry decides to uproot and leave.
Instead of being like, okay, how do we make it easier for them to
Exactly. And think about this.
How do we integrate this better?
The film industry will leave. They left Los Angeles and New York and came to a southern state on the East Coast.
Yeah.
They will leave. They will go anywhere. So you have to play it safe. I mean, if you want the film industry to be there, it's what they say they want. Everybody wants that. Then you cannot be playing games with the money, because studios, doesn't matter if you have creatives or directors or people that love working out of Atlanta, because it has within driving distance any kind of location to film at that you might need, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter. If a studio says no, then you can't do it.
And
a studio that has an office in Los Angeles that's saving money because they are pushing their industry to Atlanta, if you say no, they will say, all right, we're uprooting and going to freaking Pittsburgh. I don't know.
Right.
They'll go to somewhere else.
Yeah, they'll go somewhere else.
And you have to be really careful to not do that to the state has to be careful not to do that to the film industry. And I'm not saying you need to just cater to the film industry, but what you have been doing is working and causing growth and flourishing. So you don't need to change that. You need to figure a way to keep the state safe if there is some kind of financial liability, but also take into consideration that you can't operate on the current numbers. You should really be looking at the numbers before the film industry came into the state. That's what you have to play it with. Yeah. Because they're looking at 2022's numbers or 2023's numbers and saying, oh, well, we're this much, we didn't 1.35 billion is what is considered a loss or a liability or whatever. But it's not, because the industry will leave and you won't have that. You'll have less than that.
Right. Yeah. We'll see. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to solve this or exactly what's going to happen.
Well, they're going to vote on it. So the bad news is it looks like, so let me go back to here. So the House voted basically, let me read this first couple statements. So Georgia's housing members are moving to tighten Georgia's lucrative film tax credit, limiting the value of credits movie makers can cash in by selling them to others and require them to spend more in the state. The House voted 131 to 34 on Thursday to approve House Bill 1188, sending it to the Senate for more debate. So in Georgia, the House or whatever voted pretty highly in favor of this move. But it doesn't mean it's executing yet. And they actually did say in another article I read that if it does take effect, we might not actually see it until 2026. So, so we still have a couple years for them to figure this out. And this is pretty early news. But it's something to keep track of, especially since I'm expecting Atlanta to be my new home in a few months. Right. And so I am all in favor of as much industry being there as possible, because even if there's film industry I don't like, it's better to have a lot and stuff I don't like than to have none. It's much better. So yeah, does that make you nervous at all? Does it give you thoughts?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean,
you grew up around Atlanta and you're born there and everything. So
if people want to make movies here, they'll make movies here. If they don't
have less money cash flow in the area.
If they don't, they'll leave, and that's fine with me too.
I don't think it's fine with me. I love the way this is playing out with Atlanta being like the new hub for Hollywood.
I like that. But it it's not as big of a deal, I think, for me.
Maybe not for you. I don't know. I
like like the opportunities.
I'm a futurist. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'm thinking about the future in what's strategically good, not just for me, but for the industry I work in. And
Mhm.
Atlanta, at least for the next 20 years, I feel like has the best chance at being a redemptive power for Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be sent back to California. It
Or
doesn't
it'll
need to be
crash and
sent,
burn with Hollywood.
or it'll crash and burn with Hollywood, but
We'll
that
see.
there'll be we at least need industry in Georgia to pick up the pieces. I don't
Right.
want the pieces to be picked up out in California because it's not going to be built on a
Yeah.
solid foundation. And it also just creates market competition. I mean, city competition, you might say. I think it's state
Mhm.
to state competition. I think it makes an industry so much more healthy when you have that. And we
Yeah.
haven't had it for decades until like 15 years ago.
Well, let's wrap this up.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us. And
Yeah.
and Joshua will be back next week. And even if his voice does sound a bit
It'll hopefully be
scraggly,
better by next week.
he might come out at the other end of this with a completely new voice.
Mhm.
It might change completely. His voice box might be distorted for the rest of
Totally
his life.
changed. Yeah.
Totally changed. And then the podcast becomes a whole new thing because
Mhm.
his voice has changed. Let us know what you guys think, if Joshua's going to make it or not. Thank you so much. We love you. We'll see you next time.